Starting on the warm-up. So the first thing that we're going to do, question number 1. In fact, question 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are all questions that I'm hoping everybody gets right on the quiz. And you don't just have 4 questions like that. I believe you have 6 questions like that, because I feel like the 1, 2, 3, 4, they're multiple choice questions. And then 3 and 4 are also an open-ended question. So we should get those right. Those are easy questions. If you were struggling with those on the practice worksheet, well, then pay attention during the warm-up. They're easy. You should figure out how to do them, and we get them right. So question number 1, it is simplifying a square root. You guys learned how to do this when I was gone. It's a pretty easy task. What we're looking for are perfect squares that go into whatever that square root is. It's easy to make a list of perfect squares. You can start with 1, 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4. And so that list is pretty easy to jot down. We've got 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49. And you could go further. This list is probably going to get you through the quiz. So what you're looking for is the biggest perfect square that goes into your square root. So when we're looking at the square root of negative 32, what's the biggest one of those numbers that goes into 32? Bigger than 4 is 16. So if you do 4, you can still reduce it. So you want to look for the biggest number. So 32 is divisible by 16. So another thing, you want to make sure that you put the negative with the perfect square. So when I rewrite this, this is the same thing as negative 16 times 2. So I can't really evaluate square root of 2 without getting a decimal. I don't want decimals, but I can evaluate the square root of negative 16. First, what is the square root of just 16? 4. But because it's negative, what is it? 4i. So I get 4i square root 2. The I never goes in the square root. The I never goes in the square root. So if you're doing a multiple choice question, don't pick the answer that has I in the square root. It never goes there. It goes with whatever negative number comes out. Also, for this problem, there was a square root already there. So there's no plus and minus, even though there's a square root. Only plus and minus when you put a square root in the problem. So that one already had a square root. So there's no plus and minus. And that's it. It's just simplifying. I to the 14th power. Yes, Melody had a good question. Am I going to have to put the I cycle? Am I going to have to figure it out? Yeah, but it's pretty easy. We've got I and negative I. 1 and negative 1 goes in the I cycle, and that's it. So you can always start with these two, which we should know. We've got I to the first power and then I to the second power. And then we're going to make our little chart at the third power and then I to the fourth power. You really only have to remember 2 of them because the other 2 have to be their opposites. So I to the first power is pretty easy. It's just I. It's just I. That's it. I squared. What is I squared? Negative 1. Okay, so that's half of my I cycle. Now, across from them are their opposites. So if that's I, then this is what? Negative I. And if this is negative 1, then this is 1. So remember that if you have I to the 14th power, what you're going to do is start with I to the first power. So we're going to start here, I to the first power, and we're going to count around. You do that and write down what you think the answer is. It's only one of those 4 options. Count. So remember, you have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You do it until you get to 14 and then write down where you land. What did you get? -1, good job. Easy peasy. Get that question right. Question 3, we have several of those questions on the practice worksheet. All it is adding and subtracting. That's it. So we basically have two different binomials that we're putting together. You have to put constants with constants and imaginary numbers or complex numbers with complex numbers. And so I have -19 and I have 8. Those are both my constants. And then I have 5 and I have 3. I'm going to take my parentheses off because I don't need them. The second set of parentheses, the only reason we have parentheses is if you're distributing in a sign. What happens if you multiply everything by +1? Nothing. So do I even really need parentheses there? No. So all I'm doing is adding. I will tell you that you have one on your quiz, and I believe it's subtracting there. So you have to distribute in a negative and a negative, or make whatever's in the parentheses. It has to be opposite signs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up vertically, like a first grade math problem. So I have -19. I'm going to pair with it 8. So +8. I have 5i, and I'm going to pair with it 3i. And it's, excuse me. I'm going to pair with it 3i. So +3i. And I'm just adding. So -19 + 8. What do we get? What do we get? -11. And then 5 + 3 is 8i. I don't have to do anything unless I end up with I squares. That's it, done. The next question, what is the operation? Because it's not addition or subtraction. It's multiplying. So be careful. I believe I usually use FOIL, but I feel like that you typically do better when you make a box. So let's make a box. If you don't make mistakes when you FOIL, well then FOIL. It does. I don't care how you get the right answer. So multiplying things in, I'm going to do that. I want you to do that. Fill in the box. So what I end up with, -5 × 3, I get -15. And then I have 35 - 6. What is that? So +29i. And then I have 14i squared. What is I squared? -1. So I'm replacing the I squared with -1. All right. So I end up with -15 + 29i, and then 14 times -1 is -14. Well, these are like terms, so let's put them together. What's -14 and -15 put together? -29 + 29i. So standard form is that you write the constant first and then the I second when you're writing complex numbers. All right, like I said, that is like 5 or 6 questions on your quiz. We got to get these right. The next question, it says solve. So when it says solve, it doesn't even tell you how to solve, but we need to know what solve means. Solve means get x equals. For the first one, you could factor it, or you could just solve using a square root. Using a square root, we're going to get 81 to the other side and then square root it. That's easy. So if I'm adding 81 over here, I will subtract 81. So I get x squared is equal to negative 81. At this point, I can use square roots to help me. So if I have x squared, but I want x, well, I can move this square over. The inverse of squaring something is square rooting. I'm putting a square root in the problem. So if I'm putting it in the problem, I have to do plus and minus. So plus and minus the square root of negative 81. What is the square root of 81? 9, but since it's negative, what's the square root of? So I got plus and minus 9i. That is my answer. On your quiz, you got something just as easy. You've got x squared plus 81. Let's see, you might have x squared plus 25, x squared plus 36, x squared plus 100, something easy, but it's basically the same question. Question 6, we're going to come back around to it. I don't tell you how to solve it. You're going to solve it one of two ways, your choice. But let's refresh how to solve using the two methods that we're using today. Well, I guess 3. You can solve by a square root. And then the other methods are completing the square or quadratic formula. So on your quiz, there's 2 questions, and I tell you, use completing the square or use quadratic formula. And then you have 1 or 2 questions more where I don't tell you how to solve it. You get a choice. You can use either method, whichever one you like better. So again, solve means I want x equals. Solve means get x equals. And for the quadratic formula, x is equal to the quadratic formula. That's what you're solving. So for question 7, anytime you are completing the square, this one says completing the square, you'll use this formula. And I give it to you on the quiz. You don't have to memorize it. Although hopefully if you've done your notes and your homework, you did memorize it, but that's okay. Even if you didn't, it's on the quiz. What we have to do though is we have to write it in a format to be able to complete the square. That means we have to be able to have a placeholder for our magic number that we're going to put in here. So I'm going to rewrite this. And when I rewrite this, I also need the 26 over here. So I'm going to have to subtract 26 onto that side. So I'm going to have x squared plus 10x. I'm going to leave a spot for my magic number is equal to negative 26 and a spot for my magic number. When you are completing the square, you are always adding. Let me say that again. When you complete the square, you're always adding. So whatever I put here, I'm going to add it to both sides. Let's figure out what the magic number is. The magic number, when you complete the square, it depends on what your middle term is. It is a 10. So off to the side. I have 10 divided by 2. What is 10 divided by 2? 5. What is 5 squared? 25. So I'm adding 25 to both sides. When you complete the square, factoring is easy. So I will always end up with something squared. And if it goes in there, you just take b, the middle number, and you half it. What is half of positive 10? Positive 5. If it was negative 10, it would be negative 5 in here. So we've got positive 5. Negative 26 plus 25. What do we get? Negative 1. Now we're going to solve using square roots. So we just factored it. That's factored. But now we want x by itself. To get x by itself, let's bring the square root over. I'm putting a square root in the problem. So it's plus and minus the square root of negative 1. What's the square root of positive 1? 1. So what's the square root of negative 1? 9i or sorry, 1i or just I is fine. So we get x plus 5 is equal to plus and minus I. We're almost done. We want x equals. So to get x all by itself, we just need to bring the plus 5 over. So we will subtract 5. Whenever you write these, again, you put the constant first and then the plus or minus I part. So I end up with x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus I. That is completing the square. That is one method that you're using on your quiz. If you like that one, then when you get to choose, use this one. Solve using the quadratic formula. Again, you can use this on any question. What we're going to first do is identify what is A, B, and C. So A is equal to 1, B is equal to negative 14, C is equal to 38. That is A, B, and C, and I have a formula. All I'm doing is plugging these things into my formula. So I'm going to plug them into the formula. I want you to plug them into the formula, so I'm not going to say it out loud. I want you to practice plugging these into the formula. Okie dokie, I'm going to talk through the formula now. So what we get first is negative B. I already wrote down what A, B, and C are. So B is negative 14, but it says it needs to be negative B. So whatever B is, it's the opposite sign. So I start out with positive 14. Plus or minus the square root of B squared. Well, B is negative 14. Why do you think I wrote it as positive 14? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So honestly, it doesn't matter if you put positive or negative. But what I do notice is that y'all make mistakes. If you put a negative there, you start ending up with like negative something there. It doesn't matter if it's 14 times 14 or negative 14 times negative 14. It's going to be the same answer either way. And then minus 4 times 1 times 38. So 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So 2 times 1. Those of you that are going to get the right answer on these are the ones of you that take your time and write everything out. Don't try and do it all in 7 steps. You've got these little simple function calculators. It's too much. So 14 plus or minus square root of, what's 14 times 14? 196. What is 4 times 38? What? 152. All over 2. We got to write it out step by step. Quadratic formula is not bad, but don't make mistakes on it. So now I'm going to rewrite it. So I've got 14 plus or minus. What's 196 minus 152? 44 all over 2. So now I have the square root of 44. Can the square root of 44 be reduced? Yes. What perfect square goes into 44? 4 times 11. So this is something I'm just going to do kind of off to the side. I'm going to just simplify my square root. 44 is the same thing as 4 times 11. The square root of 4 is 2, so I get 2 square root 11. I know that some of you can do that in your head, but don't make mistakes. Just do yourself some little side work. All right. Then I end up with 14 plus or minus 2 square root 11 all over 2. Yep.
I thought C was, oh wait, never mind.
At this point, I'm not really solving anything. Like all I'm doing with quadratic formula is I keep simplifying stuff. What I notice is that I can split this fraction up so that I can reduce them. So all I'm doing is splitting the fraction. So I'm kind of running out of room, but I'll just write it and I'll try and write it small underneath. So I end up with 14 over 2 plus or minus 2 square root 11 over 2. Sorry, I know it's small down at the bottom. And I'm doing that because each one of those pieces can reduce 14 over 2. That can reduce 2 over 2. That can also reduce. So I end up with 14 divided by 2 is 7. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So it's just 1 times the square root of 11, or just square root 11. So some of you might like quadratic formula better. Some of you might like completing the square better. It doesn't matter. You get a choice on one of them. So what I'd like for you guys to do now is to go back to this question, and I want you to solve it using whichever method you like better. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to solve that one. What would you simplify with? But which perfect square? All right, with question number 6, this is the answer. So if you got a chance to finish it, you can check your answer. If not, we still have to move on because we need to take our quiz. So go ahead and turn in this warm up and we're gonna get started on the quiz. Turn in this warm up and we will get started on the quiz.